I'm in Gibson Cemetery, which is located in Park Hills, Missouri. There was a lead mine here. There were a lot of Hungarian immigrants who worked in the lead mine. One particular Hungarian immigrant was described as being very pale with white hair and red eyes. To me, it sounds like he may have been an albino, but back then, there were many children, it says, in the legend, who were dying mysteriously. And this particular Hungarian immigrant was said to have a very nasty disposition about him. They said he was cruel and mean, and also that he never went anywhere during the daylight unless it was to the mines, which was the only place he would work, inside the mines. Which, if you were an albino, that would make sense. I think sunscreen wasn't invented till about 1938. So, if you had pale skin, you would likely burn. Nevertheless, they believed he was a vampire and responsible for the mysterious deaths of the children. He lived in Elvins, which is about 2 miles from this cemetery. And when he died, they buried him on the outside of this cemetery. They put an iron fence around his grave. Some stories say even a concrete slab. And they hung crosses on the iron fence. And he's been known in the legend as the Elvins Vampire. They say you see the vampire walking in the cemetery. You see objects moving in the cemetery. The wind does weird things, and the trees move when there is no wind. There's no wind at this point. The trees aren't moving. Can you make the trees move? That voice is Michelle. And the other thing that happens here is you feel watched. And I have to say, I do kind of feel watched. Now, I read that it's impossible to find his grave, the Elvins Vampire, because the fence is no longer there. There's an iron fence up there, but that's not on the outskirts of the cemetery. And he has no headstone. Some reports say that his name may have been Orlin. He was a man who had 3 children, 2 twin boys, Samuel and Daniel, who are also buried in this cemetery, and 1 daughter. And I did read a story that said the 2 twin boys were also albino. And there's somebody knocking on something in the distance. Is there a vampire buried here? You can talk into this camera. My name is Shannon. I'm looking for the Hungarian miner from Elvins. Who had a very pale complexion. Is he here? If you are here, can you show yourself? People say they see you here. That's a bird. That's someone knocking on something, hammering, it sounds like. There are some houses over that way. And there's one that you can probably see it there. One awful thing about this cemetery is that a lot of vandals have come, broken tombstones, see that, and just done a lot of terrible things here. There's been criminal activity. So it is under surveillance, they say. I wonder why there's a green ribbon around that tree. But most of the graves you can't find anymore. The first burial happened here in 1824. And this whole cemetery is about 2 to 3 acres. And there are many unmarked graves here to begin with, because apparently they had an issue with grave robbers in this cemetery. So what people would do is bury their relative with no marker, and instead plant a tree or flowers or a bush to mark their relative's grave to avoid it being disturbed. So it's got some dark history, which could be a reason why there are hauntings. Also, I found that there were a few burials. Joseph Dalton, he was killed by a bread truck in 1917. I believe he was only in his 30s. Are you here, Mr. Dalton? Then there was a John Lawless, who is said to have accidentally shot himself in 1909. Are you here, Mr. Lawless? Any of you can talk to me. Sounds like a car noise. Another bang. And then there was a Moses Middleton, which I'm kind of curious about this one. He drowned in the big river, and they're not certain whether he committed suicide or was murdered or it was an accident, but they ended up putting it down as a suicide. Are you here, Mr. Middleton? Do you want to set the record straight? Did you hurt yourself? Or was it an accident? You can talk into my camera. I'd love to hear from you. Altogether, they believe there are at least 250 graves in here, if not more. And 175 have been identified. Who's buried here? That sounded like a scream of some sort. I don't know. Might have been a bird. Oh, there it is again. Maybe it's a child. child. It sounds kind of like a child. Which, the Elvins Vampire, his victims, his supposed victims, are buried in here too. A lot of children's graves. But you gotta remember, back in that time, there were all kinds of epidemics. Diphtheria, tuberculosis, typhoid. Stuff we all have vaccinations for nowadays. But a lot of kids would die from that stuff, as well as adults. There are a lot of reasons the children could have died, but the mysterious dying, that's kind of interesting, why they wouldn't know it was an illness. Like Spanish flu, scarlet fever. Did anybody get sick? Whaley. Is it Mr. or Mrs.? A little... Oh, there's a lamb. It's a child. 2. Oh, sorry you died so young. Were you sick? Did you not feel well? Now that would have been before the Elvins Vampire. The Elvins Vampire children were between 1913 and 1920. The wire fence here, maybe that was a marker for where the cemetery may have ended. Why is there a fence here? That's interesting. Looks really old. Is this where the cemetery ended? It looks like a goat's head. The end of that tree, the root system there. Is there a goat man here? Let me show you. That looks old when that fence was put up. I'm on the outside of the cemetery. Can you tell me where the Hungarian miner is at? The Hungarian miner from Elvins? Are you in here somewhere? Whose grave is this? And a tree planted right in the middle. Looks like an important grave. Who are you? You look important. Concrete slab. He's buried here. Oh, it is a concrete slab. Are we on the outside of the... Where's that fence? It's over there. Is this the Hungarian gentleman from Elvins? Is there anyone here? Whose grave is this? There's a concrete slab here. So I'm thinking it belongs to somebody. And then there's this marker. Can you touch one of those machines? Make the lights go off. One of them balls or the REM pod. Touch that antenna. Do you know what an antenna is? You should. I believe they had radios in 1920s. 1900s. Doctor. That's Michelle's spirit talker. Were you a doctor? Or did you need a doctor? Michelle says there's another grave up there that looks like it may have had a fence around it at one time. We may walk up there as well. Are you the gentleman from Elvins who was Hungarian, who worked in the mines?
There's some wood that looks like it was burnt.
Uh-huh.
And this thing come across with rituals.
Oh, yeah, people probably do.
People keep running.
People keep running? Who are they running from? Do bad people come here and do bad things?
Twins.
Twins. This guy from Elvins, this Hungarian from Elvins, supposedly had twins, and his 2 twin sons were albino, and they're supposed to be buried in here too.
Oh, really?
So that's another indication. If they think that's who he was, that's another indication that he was albino and not a vampire as well. Although he might have been a mean man.
Could be.
But he probably wasn't a vampire. I don't know. People say vampires exist. And he did come from the old country. Hungary. I'm from Hungary. Well, my family is. Part of my family. So I can say that about Hungary. Maybe the spirit box? You don't seem very interested in any of that. Although we may be getting conversation on that recorder. I want to note that there are a bunch of knocks going on in the background. Now they sound like they're coming from over here. What was that?
Amanda.
Is there an Amanda here? Are any of those gentlemen I spoke about? The guy who drowned in the big river, is he here? The guy that was hit by the truck? And the guy who shot himself? Are you here? And what about that one? Looks like someone's building wrought iron on that.
Yeah, that one there.
And that one looks newer too, don't it?
Yeah. Somebody's bent it like we're trying to get into it.
Well, and it's not on the outside of the cemetery either. I believe that they would have buried him on the outside of the cemetery because they didn't want him to be near the children they think he murdered. Plus, I don't think they would have buried a vampire next to everybody else. Oh, yeah, I see that. That looks interesting. They said there's a wooden cross right at the beginning of the cemetery. At the beginning of the cemetery.
Well,
It marks the entrance to the cemetery.
let's go. Something. The cemetery.
Yeah, that's supposed to mark the entrance. The Gibson Cemetery. So we came in the back way. Yeah, it does. This looks interesting. Well, we're gonna go. You can't come with us. You have to stay here. But we wish you peace. Thank you. Listen, them birds are just, yeah, them birds are just going nutty.